morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the National Bank of Fujairah's Knowledge Series. I'm Hamd Al-Hosani, and I'm privileged to be your host for today's session. This event holds a special place in our continuous journey towards sustainability, echoing the UAE's pledges made during COP28 and the collective global effort to transition to a low-carbon economy. Organized in partnership with LSEG, today's theme is Accelerating ESG, Turning Plans into Results. Today, we are aiming to share actionable insights on how businesses can align their ESG practices to the country's ESG agenda that encompasses the UAE Energy Strategy 2050 and also mirrors the COP28 global commitment to significantly increase renewable energy generation and enhance energy efficiency by 2030. We'd also encourage you to utilize the opportunity and engage with our distinguished speakers and to forge impactful connections with fellow industry professionals. Now, without further delay, I'll invite Mr. Mohammed Al-Ghamri, Head of Corporate Banking, National Bank of Fujairah, for his opening remarks.
Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. We, as usual, NBF, we appreciate your business and we appreciate the time you allocate to be with us. And we always try to build on this partnership to make it a mutual benefit for both the bank and for all your organizations. And today we will be in the second year of the sustainability year that's extended towards 2024. And we are pleased to host this knowledge-based series to take the environmental stewardship, the social responsibility, and the transparent governance from discussions and intentions into actions. So the main theme today is how do we move towards action. Stimulated by the commitments made during COP28 and the global transition towards the low-carbon emissions, and a lot of companies, as we see globally, are in many industries are moving in a wide range of social and environmental actions, and they are reaping the rewards of this. And today we will aim to have the dialogue and listen to the speakers from different domains, experts in their areas, to see how companies can go beyond the superficial discussions and embed the ESG practices into their day-to-day business, and how to align the business ESG practice with the national and international climate goals. While we understand how crucial the ESG reporting is going to be an important element for all companies going forward, we will also try to focus on how to understand the disclosure process and how the companies need to disclose their challenges, their progress, and their plans going forward. And we're all aware that there's a great deal to be done by companies like yourself in the coming years to be able to contribute to the sustainability commitments of the country to fight the global warming and reduce carbon emission. The National Bank of Fujairah, as a national bank, has a key role to play in the country commitments towards these goals. And also we have commitments towards you to help you and support you throughout your journey. And that's why today's event is organized with London Stock Exchange Group to help you understand these practice and how these we can move it into actionable plans and building meaningful ESG frameworks and stay ahead of the curve while remain profitable and relevant and competitive in your markets. Lastly, I would like also to inform you that as part of NBF ongoing sustainability commitments and to help clients to achieve their goals in the sustainability domain, we partnered with Living Business in a program that provides guidance and support to adopt these practices within your day-to-day activities. And this initiative would be a great opportunity for us to work together and create more sustainable future. During the day, we have Mr. Keith Bradley will explain more about the program and how we can participate and benefit from it across different industries. So we hope today's discussions will provide an insight to your ESG strategies and frameworks throughout the implementation journey. And thank you again for being here with us today. And without further ado, I will hand you over again to Hamda to take us through the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Let's start with our very first presentation of the day, Business Strategy, the way forward from COP28. Our speaker for this session is Goban Gopal, ESG Director, Grant Thornton, UAE. Goban brings over 12 years of strategy and transformation experience in financial services and other sectors across Australia, UK, and the Middle East regions. He has experience across several projects, including ESG strategy, GHG emission calculations, sustainability reporting, procurement OP model and finance process optimization, and various other strategy and consulting initiatives. Mr. Goban, if you can join us on stage.
Good morning. So thank you everyone for this opportunity. It's great to be with you here today. And thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, this is a really important topic. I think all of us are impacted either directly or indirectly through climate change. And what we're seeing at an individual level, at a consumer level, or across organizations is people moving towards sustainable decisions and changing their mindset and making informed decisions around sustainability. As a way of introduction, as the speaker mentioned, my name is Goban Gopal. I'm a director within Grant Thornton Advisory. For those who don't know the firm, it is a advisory, assurance and tax services institution. We provide services across each of those areas, and I predominantly sit within the advisory space. And from an ESG perspective, the areas where we try and support our clients is around developing an ESG strategy. We also support on the reporting side of things as well. So there are various standards, frameworks around ESG reporting, and we'll kind of touch on these a bit later today. But one of the key areas that we'll discuss is around what are the types of reporting areas that you can look at and what's to come in the future. I guess the final point on that in terms of what we do as well is around emissions baselining. So for all of these organisations that are looking to try and estimate how their overall GHG emissions are, we've supported clients through that journey. And that's a key step in order to take it forward towards developing a strategy towards net zero as well. So just in terms of what we'll cover today, we'll cover quickly the key outcomes from COP28. We'll look at some of UAE's sustainability commitments. We'll discuss some of the frameworks that organisations are taking and that are out there both globally but also locally. And finally, we'll touch on the ESG reporting side as well. So key outcomes from COP28. This was quite a momentous experience, and we were quite fortunate to have COP28 within the UAE last year. So it was momentous for a few reasons. I guess firstly, we saw the participation increase almost to double what it had been in COP27 in Egypt the year before. So we went from roughly around 50,000 participants to over 100,000 participants that will involve, showing the importance that sustainability is having in our world today. We had also an online option where people, I think 300 people were online, and we had representation across 200 countries roughly. And this was also the first of the COPs where we had the global stocktake that took place as well. But I guess what were some of the key outcomes that came out of COP28 last year? So the first one is around the signalling of the reduction in fossil fuels. So this is a transition that we had almost 200 parties sign up to, where we'd be looking to transition from the fossil fuel kind of energies that we have today and looking to convert that into more renewable sources. And this is where one of the second key elements came out around move to increase the capacity of renewable energy by 3 times by 2030. So there are 2 key factors on renewable energy and energy efficiency. The first one being increasing capacity, and the second one being around improving the overall efficiency. And we wanted to improve the efficiency in 2030 by double. So these are a couple of the key elements that came out of COP28. We also had a new fund that was developed for the loss and found, so the less than damage. So this was an area that was created as part of COP27. But what we saw at the first day of COP28 was that $600 million was supported by a number of countries to be able to support the lost and damaged fund. And what this relates to is supporting those countries and communities that are climate vulnerable. So it's more about the underprivileged who don't have the capability, the access to be able to support them on the climate and sustainability journey. One of the other record pledges that we saw at COP28 was around the Climate Fund. So the Green Climate Fund was developed by the UNFCCC, so the United Nations Framework for Climate Change. And they developed this on the basis to be able to support the world in developing a low emissions economy and supporting us against any climate resiliency. So this was a fund that saw over $13 billion supported and included within the fund to support us on our journey towards net zero. These are some of the areas that were kind of discussed and alluded to in terms of some of the outcomes from COP28 at a very macro level. I think what's also good to highlight is what we've seen some of the announcement from certain organisations as part of COP28 as well. Within financial services, we've seen ENBD, for instance, come out and pledge that they'll go net zero by 2050. So they've recently gone and done an emissions baselining activity, which is kind of the key starting point to understand where their emissions are across all of their operations and their supply chain. And based on that, they've gone out and said to the world that they will become net zero by 2050. And this aligns with, obviously, the broader global and UAE standards as well. The way they're going to do that is around energy transition, so investing in more renewable energy. They'll enhance their energy efficiency, and with a lot of the decisions that they make, whether that's in investment or in lending, they look to make sustainable criteria one of the factors within their net zero policy. If I look at FAB, for instance, they are one of the preeminent leaders in the financial services industry when it comes to sustainability. So in 2017, they signed up to the Net Zero Banking Alliance, one of the first in the Middle East. They also had their first green bond, which matured in 2022. And as part of that, they were able to support over 13 green projects across the world. What they've also looked to do as part of this framework and supply chain sustainable finance framework, I should say, is they've looked to bring more transparency and more governance around the green bonds and sustainability finance that they have. And what they're looking to do is to make it as clear and as transparent as possible for each of these green bonds that you have, where the money is going as part of that, and making sure there's full traceability across, which is a big step forward kind of in the investing side of things for green bonds. If I look at some of the other companies quickly, Emirates Global Aluminium, they've also supported discussions with some of their supply chain, looking to reduce costs across the supply chain and support each of the vendors. And that's a dialogue that needs to take place across your suppliers to be able to support the network and bring sustainability out as a topic of discussion. If I look at the final one as well, which is DEWA. So DEWA's made a commitment to invest in renewable energy going forward, and they're taking a very technological approach. So investing in finance energy storage solution as well as smart grids as well. So these are some of the organisations that have made some announcements. Obviously, there was a lot more during COP28, but these are some of the areas that you can see organisations focusing on. So what are some of the topics that were discussed during COP28 as well, which I guess obviously impact a lot of you here today? So sustainable supply chain, we've kind of discussed briefly. If I talk about regulations and compliance, this was an interesting topic that came up. As you'll see a bit later in the presentation, there's a number of frameworks, there's a number of standards that sit globally, regionally for specific industries. One of the challenges that organisations have faced, especially across the likes of Europe and other areas where you've had a number of organisations having to deal with multiple standards and frameworks, is how to apply all of these where there's particular contradictions in place. I think what you'll find and what the discussion was around COP28 is that moving forward, we'll actually see more of a convergence of some of the kind of standards and frameworks that are coming out. So rather than seeing more and more new frameworks that will come through and more regulations, we're likely to see an extension of existing ones that you have in place. I will go through this in a bit more detail a bit later. One of the areas that was also brought up is around the journey to net zero. So I think Emmanuel Macron and Michael Bloomberg brought out the concept of a data portal. One of the biggest challenges when understanding your emissions across both your operations but as well as your supply chain is understanding and having the data available to be able to calculate that. And that's one of the biggest challenges that a lot of organisations face. What they're looking to do as part of this data portal is be able to, firstly, for organisations to go in and make pledges to what kind of commitments they're looking to make for net zero, but it also provides, the intention is for it to also provide the data that's available from other companies and other organisations that are within your supply chain that will allow you to support and understand how much emissions you are contributing as part of your supply chain as well. Another key topic was diversity and inclusion. So this is an area that is probably been discussed quite a bit before, but I think where the discussion took place this time is more around, what we've been doing to date is around bringing in diversity, making sure we have an inclusive environment. But it's also about kind of maintaining the talent and retaining them as much as possible so that we can have sustainable growth within diversity and inclusion. And it's almost part of our day-to-day rather than having to hire in and focus on that. But more and more organisations are also moving to diversity and inclusion as well. I'll just quickly touch on the UAE's sustainability commitment. So in 2017, the UAE came up with the National Climate Change Plan. So this is a roadmap that takes into consideration the GHG emissions calculations. It looks at climate resiliency and the overall roadmap for how you can become a sustainable, growing economy. And this is one of the key features that they introduced in 2017, and it looks as forward as to 2050. Now, obviously, things have changed since then, but I think broadly there are still a few other frameworks and commitments that the UAE is looking to take forward. The first one is the UAE Green Agenda of 2030. You'll find that this is very much around the transition towards a green economy. And what they're looking to do is invest in certain sectors that are out there. So we've got the energy sector, water, transport and construction. And they have very clear strategic priorities that they want to focus on, being around investment, workforce, life, and how you can make these more and more green. The UAE energy strategy for 2050 is obviously a key one. So for an economy and for a country that has previously been, quite heavy in not so renewable energies, you would see that this is a huge transitional shift for the UAE. And the focus here is around building out renewable energy. It's around reducing the overall carbon footprint and making sure that we're improving the overall energy efficiency that we've discussed as one of the key areas within COP28 as well. And the final one is what we all kind of are looking at from a global level as well, and that's aligning to the global efforts around net zero for 2050. What you find with a lot of organisations they are also aligning their strategies and what they're looking to do with some of the strategies that are set out by the UAE, but also globally as well. So I just want to touch on some of the kind of global standards and frameworks that are out there. This can be quite an intimidating slide for those that haven't necessarily been too well versed in kind of ESG and sustainability. But I guess the key message here is there's a number of standards that are in place across the globe. And a lot of them are at a global level, but you've also got various different standards that happen at specific regional areas, but also industry specific as well. I guess the most common ones that a lot of organisations report against are around GRI and obviously the UN Sustainability Development Goals. But you also have a number of organisations who are reporting on other areas that have been around in a while, including SASB and CDP, for instance. But one of the challenges that organisations are facing and some of the decisions that they need to make are around what frameworks and standards are applicable to them, which ones are the most appropriate for them to take forward. And as you're kind of developing your strategy, you're generally kind of coming up with which ones are most applicable to yourselves in terms of the operations that you do. For some of the organisations, particularly financial services industry, for instance, you may have specific standards as well. So TCFD, or Principles of Responsible Banking. Once again, these aren't ones that are mandatory in a lot of places, but these are optional ones that some banks and financial institutions are looking to take forward. But it's a kind of a complex web, and this is an ever-evolving picture. I think if you look down below, even recently, Oman has introduced new kind of standards around ESG reporting and what's required from organisations. And the same has happened with Bahrain and the region as well. So it's an ever-evolving picture. And I think some part of the discussion, as I mentioned before, is COP28 is. The hope is this picture won't necessarily increase too much, but we'll hopefully have a convergence of some of the standards so it makes it easier for organisations who are going on this journey. So a typical journey for some organisations is, as we discussed with the frameworks and the standards, what are the key ones that you want to take forward? What are the key focus areas that you see, and what's the most important and material topics to you as an organisation, as well as your stakeholders and all that are involved? So generally what we find is a lot of organisations typically start with developing an ESG strategy, what they want to focus on, where their material topics are, what's most important to them, and that will then take forward how they want to take the rest of the activities, whether that's activating a department. This will generally depend on the type and size of your organisations. Your ESG department may be one person, it could be 10 or 12. It depends how this is also embedded within the organisation. But having the right governance structure and transparency in place is a key part of ESG as well. So in order to get to your annual ESG reporting, one of the key things is what are the right data and inputs that you need for that. So when you're coming up with your strategy, you're talking about your focus areas, you're identifying what are the key areas that you want to track, that you want to report on. The next challenge is the data that you need to be able to support that, because it may take 6 months, it may take a year, it could take longer for you to be able to have the data available to start reporting on that. But identifying that early is really crucial in this stage before you take that forward. And then tracking your emissions is obviously a key thing as well, depending on where you want to go with your annual ESG reporting. And the ESG reporting that we spoke about, so over here in the UAE for listed companies, we have a requirement for them to report on GRI standards, which was one of the ones mentioned. But other organisations are also going above and beyond that to report on other standards and frameworks as well. This is what you generally find as your standard journey to begin with. If I take it a little further with some of the kind of larger organisations and where they're going, once they've identified exactly what their emissions are across their operations, across their supply chain, they will understand what does that journey look like to get to net zero. So what they're going to do is they're going to have a look at all of the emissions and identify where are the hotspot areas, where are the key areas that we can look to potentially reduce as many of our emissions as possible, whether that's through our supply chain, our suppliers, whether it's through some of the operations that we do day to day. This is a key area and a key first step once you've decided on your overall emissions and you've been able to calculate that. The next step is going from what you generally have as estimates to be able to take forward to actual data. And this is where I said it can take you quite a bit of time before you get to actual data as opposed to estimates that you have to make across different parts of your operations. And then finally, you put kind of an action plan in place. So, once you know where the key focus areas are, once you know what you're looking to achieve and when you want to achieve it, you can put the plan in place to be able to deliver a net zero journey. And one of the areas that it's not really common practice at the moment, but I'm sure it's something that will come into play at some point, is around carbon offsetting. So what are the opportunities to use carbon credits and other areas to be able to reduce your overall carbon footprint? I'll just touch on this briefly, but this is a kind of value tree that we see around ESG and the potential opportunities outside of the regulatory and the compliance piece. I think when we discuss ESG sustainability, the focus previously has been all around compliance. What do we need to do to be compliant with regulations, etc.? And that's the piece in yellow here. And there's value around minimizing your reputational risk around this, but there's also value in also setting the standard to go above and beyond what the regulations are. But if you look outside the compliance side of things, there's also other areas where you can find value. So financing is one potential area where if you have potential financing needs, there is the alternative to be able to get reduced and cheaper rates of capital out there in the market. One of the other things that I've seen, and we had a discussion with the Chief Sustainability Officer at Pepsi for Middle East and Africa. So what she has done as part of her sustainability agenda is made sure that any CapEx building that Pepsi is looking to do requires a sustainable criteria and has to develop clear guidelines for what the sustainability impact is going to be. And that's a key step that they're doing across all of their CapEx expenditure within Pepsi in the region. If I look at some of the other areas, obviously we're aware of some of the top line areas with customer growth and their perception towards a brand. And some of the other areas where, depending on how far you go with your emissions and where you want to take it, there are opportunities to have efficiencies within your supply chain, automation within your supply chain, but also reduce your emissions from a waste management perspective as well. And these are just other areas outside your day-to-day regulatory impact that consumers, organisations are well considering in terms of the value for ESG. So I think next we've got a video. This video kind of summarises where we are in the UAE with ESG reporting. It talks to, what are the minimum requirements that are there for ESG reporting, but also takes a bit of a look forward. So it's a video that was developed a couple of months ago, but we can cover it off here and we'll discuss afterwards.
ESG reporting is not just good publicity. It builds trust, relevance, and a competitive advantage for organizations in the market. It also reinforces the organization's values, principles, and most importantly, commitment to society. While only listed companies have country-specific mandates for ESG reporting currently, there is a convergence of various standards and regulatory requirements globally, and even unlisted organizations are increasingly being expected to voluntarily report on ESG topics at the end of each fiscal year. The initial goal has been to encourage transparency and sustainability agendas across all organizations. In the long run, if your company is seeking funding or access to capital markets, it may be challenged or questioned by responsible investors and lenders who may be less inclined to invest or provide funds to the organization. It could even lead to potential capital outflows from its existing investors or have a similar impact on the organization from clients' and partners' perspective. In the short run, non-compliance with ESG reporting regulations may lead to fines or legal action against the company, as many countries are increasingly incorporating ESG considerations into reporting requirements. Also, the company may struggle to attract and retain top talent from a new generation who are very ESG conscious. Now that we have covered the why, let's understand what an ESG report actually covers. There are baseline standards like the Global Reporting Initiatives and United Nations Global Compact, as well as sector-specific standards provided by the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, United Nations Guideline for Consumer Protection, and others that guide ESG reporting. They assess an organization's performance on various parameters across the three fundamental pillars: environment, social, and governance. Under the environment, we cover carbon footprint and waste management. Under social, we look at health and safety, CSR, data privacy. And under governance, we look at transparency and diversity. Let's dive into one of the most recently announced, yet a cardinal standard guiding the ESG reporting globally. On the 26th of June 2023, the International Sustainability Standards Board issued two IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards, IFRS S1 and S2, which are both the first of their kind. IFRS S1 covers the general requirements for financial disclosures of sustainability-related risks and opportunities, and IFRS S2 sets out the requirements for the identification, measurement, and treatment of the climate-related risks. Both standards focus on governance, strategy, risk, metrics, and targets for their respective areas. While there is no UAE-specific reporting timeline for IFRS sustainability standards, ADX and DFM-listed companies are required to submit a sustainability report annually. This needs to be done 90 days after the end of their financial year, or before the company's AGM, whichever comes first. The global effective reporting period for IFRS sustainability standards will effectively be the 1st of January 2024, and we're expecting to start seeing the first full reports with the annual disclosures in FY25. ESG reporting is a core part of your organization's ESG strategy, and building on this ESG strategy or reporting comes with its own set of challenges, concerns, and considerations. Some of the common challenge areas for the sustainability reporting and climate financial information are as follows. You have risk management. This has always been one of the challenging areas where organizations have struggled. They need to identify, assess, and mitigate sustainability and climate-related risks that could potentially impact their cash flows and access to finance. The second area that's usually quite challenging is governance. They need to demonstrate that they have embedded sustainability into their governance structure and frameworks. The third and final area is the greenhouse gas emissions and calculations. Tracking and baselining this is a complicated task. Organizations need to be able to talk about their emissions from value chain in terms of what is a Scope 1, Scope 2, or Scope 3 emission, and this requires some fairly complex analysis around their spend, elements of HR, finance, and procurement, and requires you to interface with the data owners that sit across the organization. If this journey is something that you've started, or you're looking to embark upon this journey, please reach out to us. We think we are the right partners for you in this situation. Over the last 3 years, we've worked with multiple organizations in multiple sectors, but quite extensively in financial services, healthcare, and education, to support organizations in their sustainability journey.
Cool. So I think that was a relatively good kind of summary of where we are with ESG reporting. So I'll kind of go through these relatively quickly, but in terms of the reporting requirements, there's a regulatory requirement for ESG companies. The timeline flows from 2022 for companies to start reporting on these, and they've got until 90 days after their end of their financial calendar. As we spoke about, there's no kind of standard as to what would be in one of these reports, but I guess each of the regions are doing it differently. So for the UAE, they're basing it around GRI standards, and it's up to each individual organisation to determine of the full list of GRI standards, which are the ones that they want to report on. So from an environment perspective, they can talk about the waste and water management, the carbon footprint, electricity consumption. From the social aspect, they could talk through health and safety, CSR, data privacy, whereas on the governance side, they can talk to board of directors, transparency, etc. But as I mentioned before, it's not necessarily consistent across all organisations, and they can choose as and what they report on. As you saw in the video, there is a new IFRS standard which is coming out around S1 and S2. The expectation is for those that are listed that they'll start to report on some of the sustainability-related risks and opportunities, as well as the climate-related risks and opportunities, and that will come into place from FY25. The typical challenges that were discussed as well are just around risk management. So making sure you're clear on what your sustainability or climate-related risks are. From a governance perspective, making sure you've got the right transparency in place, you've got the right decisions going to the right kind of management forums to be able to make informed decisions around sustainability. And finally, around GHG emissions and calculations, which we've discussed. So that's it from myself. I guess, are there any questions at all?
Hello, good morning. My name is Joanna Pada. I'm from Sustainability Excellence. So I have a quick question on the frameworks and standards, because there was, like a laundry list of the international standards that relates to the ESG and sustainable finance. And there are just a few that are related or relevant for the region, because some of the international standards are actually not applicable over here. and we have only guidance from the ADX and DFM as for now. As for now, so do you expect from your experience and from Grant Thornton if there is a chance that the UAE or the region will develop its own taxonomy? Do you see that kind of the movement?
So I think there's a view that the UAE wouldn't necessarily create their own taxonomy. I think the view globally is that, we've already got quite a reasonable amount of taxonomy out there. I think the expectation would be, I think the UAE will leverage some of the existing standards that are in place and make sure there's a lot more clarity and, I guess, preciseness and specificity in terms of what needs to be done. So interestingly enough, there's a session that AGM is holding straight after this on ESG disclosures. And I think one of the things that we're expecting and anticipating soon is more guidance around some of the ESG policy requirements and reporting requirements. But I think if I look more broadly, I wouldn't say that UAE will come up with its own taxonomy. I think it will leverage what's already existing out there globally and industry-specific-wise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Govan. It was a very insightful session and a great update. Our second presentation of the day is about integrating ESG into your business. And our speaker for this session is Keith Bradley, Managing Partner, Living Business. Keith is a seasoned strategist with a track record of developing and executing growth strategies in corporate banking, including spearheading HSBC's first global strategy. He's a trusted advisor on sustainability strategies and reporting for leading Middle East firms, advocating for immediate sustainable corporate actions and its potential for future financial returns.
So actually is the word I love, especially when it comes to sustainability. And what I want to do today is spend 20 minutes talking about some of the very practical ways that companies in the region are embarking on sustainability and sustainable projects. Living Business has worked with about 200 companies across 5 countries in the region, so we have quite a lot of experience in terms of what works and what doesn't. So I'll start with, I'm going to talk about the 3 areas of ESG, environmental, social and governance. I'll give 4 examples of each one very briefly in terms of what we see being very popular among businesses, mid-sized businesses, small businesses in the region. So first of all, governance. We heard a bit about strategy, and I really liked Gobin's slide where he showed how strategy evolves into other things in businesses. We worked with one of the largest food producers in the region 3 years ago now. They came to us and said, could we help them write their first sustainability strategy, which we worked with them on that for about 6 months. The strategy went to the board, and the board said, wow, there's a lot we need to do here. We need dedicated resources to do this. And the company the group went ahead and appointed a chief sustainability officer, and we worked with her to do things like getting energy audits started in some of their manufacturing businesses, and they've now gone much further. They've actually started launching completely new products which are very sustainability focused. So a very typical journey is to start with strategy, and then that strategy leads them to other things. Reporting, we also had a lot about. I don't want to say too much more about it. I would say that we see 2 other reasons. We talked, the previous government talked about the way the stock exchanges here are requiring reporting from listed businesses, and also the way investors, if you're looking to raise money, investors are also looking for sustainability reporting. We see a lot of businesses who are looking for sustainability reporting because they supply to a government or quasi-government entity, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Saudi. They're really encouraging businesses that they own to be more sustainable, and in turn those businesses are asking their suppliers to have sustainability strategies and sustainability reporting in place. Another key area is what's going on in Europe at the moment. There's new reporting standards coming out in Europe which are very wide-reaching. Pretty much any mid-sized company in Europe will have to start reporting on their sustainability very soon. But Europe's also introducing a cross-border adjustment mechanism. So if you're exporting to Europe in an industry which the European Union considers to be high carbon, with a high environmental impact, you really need to start thinking about reporting here now, so that you can avoid extra duties when you're exporting to Europe. So the pressure to do more in terms of sustainability reporting is only growing from a number of different areas. Certifications is another key area in terms of governance. We see a lot of businesses that want to be certified, and in fact, we've worked with one leading law firm in the region to, over the last 3 years, certify all of their offices across the region in ISO 14001. ISO 14001 is a really good standard to help your business get environmental thinking and reporting rooted in your business. And it's applicable to anyone. It really is applicable to anyone. I mean, I'm talking about a law firm. They don't have a massive factory somewhere, so it's not necessarily an obvious place where you think, well, they should be more sustainable. But through implementing ISO 14001, they've actually found a lot of ways that they can improve their environmental credentials in terms of what they purchase, their waste, the amount of lighting, and they have massive TV sets on in all their guest rooms when there's no one in the room, that sort of thing. So we work with them to help them identify, not just implement 14001, but also get them on the road to taking practical steps to reducing their carbon emissions. Another popular one is ISO 50001, which is an energy efficiency standard. We've seen a business, for example, another food manufacturer. This one was in Oman, but they implemented ISO 50001. They estimated the cost of implementing was $138,000. Within the first year, they'd saved $780,000 by reducing their electricity bills by 11% and their gas consumption by 23%. So again, it's using governance to drive real tangible action. And carbon accounting, again, the previous speaker spoke a little bit about carbon accounting. It is popular. There's a lot of companies that, for whatever reason, want to have a better understanding of their carbon emissions, their own carbon emissions, and perhaps the carbon emissions that their businesses are producing elsewhere in their value chain. And this can apply to anyone. I mean, one of the smallest businesses we've ever worked with was a 5-person recruitment consultant who wanted to become carbon neutral. So we worked with him to look at where his carbon emissions were, what he could do to reduce them, and then we found an offset partner in the UAE who could sell him carbon credits to offset the balance of his emissions. In terms of environment, I've touched on some of these themes before, but energy-saving measures can have a huge financial impact. I mean, I talked about the food manufacturer in Oman. The payback can be pretty short. And there's a lot of companies in the region who will partner with you. They'll do some work for free, at no cost, to do a high-level overview of your energy usage. And if they think there's real value, there's real opportunities to reduce that, they'll come and tell you, look, we think there's good opportunities for reducing your energy consumption in these ways. We think it's worth doing a deeper dive study or not, depending on how they see your business. So that can be a good way, at no cost to yourselves, of getting a better idea of, are you really energy efficient? How efficient are you? I mean, the food manufacturer I mentioned in the first example, the one where we worked on their strategy 4 years ago, they have been totally amazed at how much energy they're managing to save in their factories as a result of going through this process of doing an energy check. And then the check said, yeah, green flag, there's a lot of potential savings we see here. They then did a proper energy audit, and they're now reaping the benefits of some very short payback periods. Renewable energy is obviously a big topic in this region. I'm sure you've all seen many companies are investing in solar. There are two main ways you can invest in solar. You can buy the equipment, you can install it yourselves, you can run it yourselves. The payback for that will vary a lot depending on where you are, but in Dubai, the payback on that can be sort of 8 to 12 years. So it's a bit longer than the most energy-saving measures. But there is another way. There are businesses here who will take on the risk of owning that equipment. They'll buy the equipment, they'll install it, they'll run it for you, and they will charge you for the electricity that equipment produces, but at a much lower rate than what you're paying DEWA, for example, today. So without any cost, without any investment on your part, you can get an immediate reduction in your energy bills. The only catch to that is they will ask for a long-term contract, so maybe 15 years. So you need to know that you need to own your own premises and know that we're going to be there for at least the next 15 years to make that worthwhile. But if you are in that situation, it's a no-brainer. It's cost-saving immediately without any risk to your business. Water is another great one. There's been a lot of, in all of these areas, there's been so much change in terms of the technology that's available today compared to what was available maybe 10 years ago. But perhaps water that's the case more than the others. And if you do use water in your operations and you're not doing any form of recycling, I would strongly recommend that you have a look at that. Just to give you another example, there was a seafood processor in Sharjah. They were using water from the public utility to wash the seafood. Obviously, it produces a lot of very dirty water as a result of that process. And they were then trucking the water out of their factory. They were paying to have the wastewater taken away and disposed of. By implementing a water cleansing, so a water recycling process, they saved. The payback was phenomenal. They paid back. I think the investment was about $150,000. Payback was in 16 months. It was super short. So there can be some really big benefits if you are using water in your operation, either to create a closed loop where the water gets completely recycled and used again in your operations. Or if you have a lot of factories, they have outside space where they've got trees and grass, using the water for irrigation purposes is another possibility. Obviously, if you're using it for irrigation, you don't need to process the water to such a high degree. Waste is another big topic. There are a lot of opportunities here. I know that later on today, one of the customers that was in the Living Business Program with NBF last year will be talking about how they've been tackling their waste and the waste that comes from their business. So I'm not going to say any more about it. I'll let them talk about it in a bit. On the social side, we've seen a lot of interest in the region in having diversity, equity and inclusion policies in place. Obviously, most businesses in the region are naturally very diverse. And I think by putting a policy in place around the diversity and how you treat your employees, how they can be expected to be treated, the forms of redress that are available to them if they feel they're not being treated in an appropriate way according to the policy, can be a really strong statement that you're a good employee, a good employer. So, I've been surprised and very happy to see a lot of businesses in the region asking us for help in terms of drafting DEI policies. Employee health and well-being is a very big one. Again, particularly coming out of COVID, we saw a lot of interest from customers in employee assistance programs. So these are programs where they go beyond just providing them the legal requirements of a healthcare plan to look at the overall well-being of their staff emotionally and mentally. And these can be as simple as just running some workshops. If you invite your employees to come and listen to someone talk about how they can sleep better, they will often be very happy to do that. You'd be surprised how many people complain about the lack of sleep they get. They feel they would like to get more sleep. You offer them an opportunity to have a professional person come and talk to them about some of the things they can maybe do to help them sleep better. They will embrace that. And that may be a good way of helping them with deeper issues. One of the reasons we saw interest in this area after COVID was that obviously people were under a lot of mental pressure, and there were businesses in the region that saw, unfortunately, suicides happening among their employees. So it's an important topic. It's one that is getting discussed more and more, and companies are taking more and more seriously. And as I say, it can be as simple as running a seminar on something like sleep, to actually putting in place a program where your employees they have someone they can go to for help if they really feel they're under a lot of mental pressure, under a lot of pressure at work or pressure at home, and there's someone they can go and talk to and get some help. Employee education is another really important area. A lot of companies do a lot of work in the education area. Obviously, there's staff training to help their employees be more productive on the job, but there's also training to help them live more fulfilling lives themselves, just as people. That could be helping them learn a language. Helping them learn a language, particularly if you've got employees who you're bringing outside the region. Maybe they don't speak English. Maybe they're going to struggle when they get here. It can also have a benefit to your business if you can improve their language skills, for example. Financial training is another really important one and popular one. There's a lot of pressure. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies here which do put pressure on individuals to take on too much debt, and giving them some counseling, learning around debt, around savings can be a really good thing for your employees. And then perhaps my favorite is training on the environment. It's a huge topic. It is impacting all of us already. We got very, very wet a few weeks ago here, and that's one of the things that is happening as a result of climate change. How is that happening? What's causing it? There's great opportunity to offer your staff training in this area. Climate Fresque, which I specifically mention here, is a concept that was developed by a Frenchman a few years ago. It's a 3-hour training in the form of a game, which you can play in groups of any size. But it's a great way of helping your staff understand the basic science behind climate change and what's happening. And it's fun. And as I say, it's now being played by over 1 million people globally. So it really is. It's very. There's a lot of companies in the region that have also used it. In fact, we're running 2 workshops tomorrow with companies who want their staff to have a better understanding of climate and why ESG is important. And finally, CSR and CSR policies. I know there's many, many businesses in this region who have had a long commitment to CSR. I always urge companies to go beyond just taking a share of. It's fantastic if the company's taking part of their profit or their revenue and dedicating that to helping the communities in which they operate. It's even better if they can put a policy in place so that there's a clear commitment. We're going to take a certain amount of our profit or revenue. These are the sectors we want to help. Engage your staff. Look at how you can involve your staff in these programs. Do you give staff time off so that they can do voluntary work? Do you track the volunteer hours they're doing? Do you contribute financially to the volunteering they're doing? These are all good ways of creating staff engagement and really reinforce, not just making sure that CSR goes deeper into the organization. So those are 12 ways that we see companies in the region, from small businesses right up to some of the largest, taking action on ESG today. We are available to help. We do have a lot of governance and ESG experience. As I mentioned earlier, we love our governance to lead to other things. We're always looking, when we're working with companies, whether it's on a strategy or reporting, we're always looking for practical ways particularly practical ways that have good payback periods. I know there's a lot of finance people in this room. I also know that nothing's going to happen in a company unless it gets signed off by the finance department. So we're always looking for short payback periods, and these exist. I mean, they really do exist a lot in this region. We are working in partnership with NBF to run a living business program for some of their customers. We're going into our second year now. We had a very successful year last year, and as I mentioned before, 2 of the companies who participated in the program last year will be talking after the panel discussion. There are no costs, financial costs, and there are no catches. NBF's not asking you to bring more banking to them as being part of the program. It's something they're offering freely because they genuinely want to see their customers accelerate their sustainability journey. And the 2024 program, as I say, we ran the program in 2023 with NBF. We're just kicking off the 2024 program. There are still some places available. So if it sounds like this is a topic you want to delve into deeper, any of those 12 areas or even something else, we're here to help. We work on I should move on to the next slide. It's here. So we just go very briefly through what the program offers. We have a living business ladder, which is the first thing we ask you to complete. It takes 20 minutes. From that, you get an idea of where you are vis-a-vis other companies in your industry in terms of their ESG journey. And you also get a report with recommendations on the next steps you could consider taking. We then develop a specific roadmap for you, and we talk through that with you in a one-on-one 1 hour. It usually takes about an hour to go through that with you. You then take that away, and we start doing some one-on-one coaching with you. You take away the roadmap, talk about it internally, come back to us and tell us what you'd like to do this year. The only requirement for the program is that you do something. But what we don't want is companies to sign up and then do nothing this year. We need companies who are going to sign up and do stuff. So we are very action-oriented. But yeah, we then work with you one-on-one to make sure that something happens this year as part of the program. We give you access to a range of tools. We also have a range of success partners we work with. For example, I was talking about energy reviews and energy audits. We've worked extensively with one particular company. We're very comfortable recommending them to you if that's something you want to look at. And we have companies in all of the other areas that I was talking about earlier, where we can potentially recommend that you work with them. We can introduce you. Obviously, you then need to take things forward with them in terms of the commercials, if commercials are required. But that's we have an extensive network of partners who we can make available to you. And then at the end of the year, we run a graduation event where you can share what you've done with the other companies in the program. You can see what they've done, and hopefully that will inspire you and them to greater action in 2025. That's the program. I hope that's been useful and interesting.
We'll now move into our panel discussion of the day, and the topic is maintaining a sustainable business. I'd like to invite Ms. Luma Saqaf, Director for the Middle East, Africa, and India region, UN Principles of Responsible Investment. Luma is a recognized sustainability and sustainable finance thought leader. Prior to joining UNPRI, Luma drew on 3 decades at the forefront of finance, Islamic finance, sustainability, entrepreneurship, and investment in MENA and Europe to advise corporates, financial institutions, funds, and asset managers on sustainable finance and transition strategies. I'd also invite on stage our esteemed panelists, Jessica Robinson, Partner Solve Strategies, Raj Ilgoli, Senior Responsible Finance and Sustainability Advisor, Sustainable Square, Goban Gopal, ESG Director, Grant Thornton, UAE.
Thank you for being here today in this great panel. What we hope to promise you, it will be a great panel. But maybe I'll set the scene a little bit, and then I wanted my guests to introduce themselves. opinion. And let's start with introducing ourselves before. It's probably better. Jessica.
Thank you. So my name is Jessica Robinson. I have been in ESG and sustainable finance for close to 20 years. I know I look very young, but there you go. I've been in the Middle East now for the last 7 years. Prior to that, I was in Asia for a good 12 years. And in fact, I used to be head of Asia for the UNPRI. Up until recently, I was partner at EY, so running our sustainable finance business, really working with clients across the region on ESG, sustainable finance. And I've written a book on sustainable investing, so it's something that's very passionate and core to my heart. That's me.
So good morning again. I've already done a quick introduction, but just to recap for those who missed, I'm Gopal Gopal. I'm a director with Grant Thornton. I've been with the firm for around 12 months now. Prior to that, I worked across the Middle East and the UK as well as part of a strategy team for Accenture. And I've been with kind of financial services for most of my career. So I started at retail and commercial bank in Australia, moved in and did consulting services for a number of financial services in the UK before moving to the Middle East and now leading some of our ESG advisory engagements. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Raj. I'm a senior consultant at Sustainable Square. I've been working with the company for the past 4 years, and I mainly specialize in developing ESG strategies and sustainability reports. And I mainly worked in the GCC region.
Thank you for that. So you can see that we have a very experienced panel to discuss that. Turning plans into results in terms of companies in our region and specifically the UAE. But maybe to set the scene a little bit, we all know that sustainability has become in the recent years very important. And in the UAE, the government specifically has been taking big steps in terms of encouraging the transformation on many levels. So we have the net zero commitment by 2050 at the government level. And we're starting to see the big corporates, the government corporates already starting to have plans. But it's not just at the government level. We're starting to see more and more changes across different industries. One of them, of course, is the banking industry. And we all know that the UAE banks have committed to make available $1 trillion dirhams in sustainable finance by 2030, which is a huge number. But I might also add from a PRI perspective, our members or signatories sit on $121 trillion in assets under management that are also looking for investments in responsible investments and looking at that globally. So one of the questions is, are companies ready to receive these amounts, these investments? Are they ready to take on some of the sustainable finance that is being made available? We're starting to see disclosures. We know that in the UAE we have now mandatory disclosure for public companies, but we're also starting to see private companies do that. Again, the question is that enough? Is what they're doing enough? Do we need to do more? Is it just a ticking the box exercise? Is it just complying and that's it? Or are they really looking at sustainability from an operational sense, taking on board what it really should mean for their companies and how it could affect their operations and their businesses? So today we've had this great panel, and we are going to discuss how we can accelerate ESG and training plans into results for companies. How can they move and become more resilient? So maybe one of the questions that I would like to ask to start with, and maybe Jessica can help us with that, is why is it important for companies to embrace sustainability? What should it really mean for them?
Okay. Thanks, Numa. So I have to, full disclosure, I'm a strategy consultant. So when you hear what I say, keep that in mind. I'm going to actually be quite controversial, and I'm going to say I really don't believe ESG should start with ESG reporting. And the challenge is, and I saw this across this region, really the diversity of clients that I've worked with, It's almost as though, okay, we have to report, therefore let's do ESG. And honestly, that's just not the way to do ESG and sustainable finance well. It has to align with your commercial objectives. So the first thing I always do with my clients is sit down and say, let's look at your commercial strategy and figure out how ESG aligns with that strategy and with those objectives. Now, firstly, you've got to look at the risks. So what are the upcoming risks and how does that impact on your business? And then secondly, you've got to look at long-term value creation. And I know that's a wonderful consulting sort of terminology, let's say value creation, but really, honestly, it has to start at that point. Now, in terms of how we do that, when you look at something like the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm guessing you probably touched on this morning, 2015, 2016, the world came together to sign up for 17 global goals. So as a business, you already have that framework in place. The governments were saying, look, this is what we want our world to look like by 2030. So as a business, you already have that information. So it's really about understanding the vision of your company, understanding what sustainable finance and ESG really does in terms of achieving those sustainable development goals, and then setting in place your ambitions and your targets. The one thing I would add, ESG is a world full of terminology and lingo, but it's really not as complicated as it sounds. The challenge you have as a company is that ESG actually touches many, many issues. ESG is a broad universe, but no one company is going to resolve or solve all of those challenges. So as a company, it's really about identifying your priorities, figuring out how that aligns with your commercial viability, and then really bringing the business in to determine what you do and how you want to move forward in the short, but also the long term. I know we're going to talk about climate in a bit, so I'm not going to talk excessively about climate because I think that's probably the real topical issue here. But I would say, and I would really encourage you to go to the Sustainable Development Goals, to look through those goals and all of the indicators and all the targets that sit underneath that, and really determine how that plots back into what you want to achieve as a company.
So that's great. I mean, if I can summarize what you've said, it's really talking about the importance of having, it's not about just saying, I want to incorporate ESG. It's about saying, what is my commercial objectives here? What are they? And how then ESG impacts those commercial objectives, and having a strategy for where you want to go, how you want to achieve it.
Exactly. And I think if you come at it from a reporting angle, we're focusing on outputs, but actually you need to do the groundwork first. And that's a senior management responsibility. That's actually taking it to the senior management team and determining how that fits in. And on the board, we all know the board needs to now be engaged in this. The regulators are looking at the board, particularly on climate risk. So again, it's don't start with reporting, start with strategy, is my perspective. Though, as I say, caveat being I'm a strategy consultant. So,
well, thank you for that. I think that's a valid point. But perhaps I don't know, Gulab, if you have any comments on that, and maybe in particular also, what would drive companies to actually whether have a strategy for ESG or incorporate ESG generally?
Yeah, look, I completely echo Jessica's point. So I think one of the areas that I covered off today is kind of what that journey looks like for a typical company, organization that's going through this. And we started with the strategy, just like Jessica mentioned, and it moves to kind of the governance and goes forward towards reporting as well. So it's great to see that we're kind of aligned on that. I think in terms of organizations, I think historically it's been kind of a reactive mechanisms where we've had some kind of regulations or compliance standards that are in place. Organizations are then having to find themselves to do the ESG reporting as a mandatory requirement. There's been less on the proactive side that we've seen historically. But I think what we're seeing, and this comes to some of the value drivers that I spoke about a little earlier, we're seeing more and more organizations kind of proactively take steps towards ESG. So following that journey from what's important to them, what's part of their strategy that also aligns with their corporate strategy, what are the key focus areas and what's material to them. So more and more organizations are starting that journey. But if I do look at it historically, I think it's been more a reactive case for a lot of companies.
In this region.
in this region.
Rash, do you have? Yeah, would you like to add?
I have to agree with Jessica. Sustainability and ESG is mainly about looking at your commercial strategy for sure, and starting from strategy is the first ideal step. But consider now the status of the market or the GCC, that would be utopian, or like a utopian view of like where to start when it comes to sustainability. At Sustainable Square, we did a study with FAB last year and also with Mira to understand what are the drivers of ESG in the GCC region. And we found that regulations actually is the first or the main driver of integrating ESG. We still saw some shift in business cautiousness or interest of business and also with the interest of investors. However, regulations are still the main driver for integrating ESG. In this context of the region, there's still a lot of lack of awareness when it comes to ESG. We have seen a more movement now after COP having been hosted in Dubai, and also considering all the government's initiatives to actually push for sustainability and ESG. However, clients or businesses, they still have doubts. They still don't understand why they're actually doing this. They're still doing it, unfortunately, to just tick the box. However, it's not about that. Sustainability is not a buzzword, or ESG is not a buzzword that you just need to do to be competitive and to seem like you're also following the trends. As Jessica said, it's something that you need to integrate within your commercial strategy. It's about linking how your sustainability or ESG initiatives link directly to your ability to create value within your company.
And I mean, that's also very, very interesting what you're saying, because what you're saying is that, yes, strategy is, and if we're all agreeing, it has got to be the first step. I think it's just a proper ESG strategy for the company that sits relates directly to your commercial objectives. But you are also saying that we need to take I don't want to say the word practical, but like where we are today, meet them where they are today kind of approach. In that our region might not be ready. And I mean, in my room, so you know, I cover a number of markets, and it's very interesting to know that where we are from in our, like in the MENA region, is not very different from, say, Africa or India, or even a lot of other emerging markets where we just have a little bit of regulations and some companies trying to do it. So where do you start? Are all companies accepting the fact that the correct way, the proper way, is to have a proper strategy that sits across, you know, right from the top of the board or not? But I also want to emphasize another point about maybe within, and you know, you said that regulations are what's driving this, right? Which is kind of true in the at what's happening in the EU. It is the biggest driver of the changes. But I think in our region and in many, as I say, you know, emerging markets, the drivers are also trying to attract investors' money from abroad. So if you want to do that, you really have to start looking at what you need to do here in order to attract that money. A lot of international companies who work, you know, who have global businesses have already started reporting at a much, much higher level in our region. Look at DP Rail, for example, Emirates, because they have these relationships, they have to. So that is also something kind of links to what you were saying, that this is the commercial reality that if you do that.
And I'm going to sort of push back. I think we've been saying this for too long. Regulation is the key driver, right? Yeah, we know that companies, particularly on the financial services side, are very conscious of what the regulators, central banks are going to do. We know the central banks in this region are looking at climate risk as a priority. But I honestly don't think that's really taking us anywhere. The reality is, and we can talk about the floods, we can talk about the fact that last week it was 44 degrees here in May, right? Climate change is happening today. Any business that wants to be successful in the next 5 to 10 years has to be understanding what the impacts of climate change is on that business. Really, the successful companies we're seeing are not waiting for regulation. They're not waiting for reporting standards.
we all know the regulators. I mean, it's been interesting watching the regulators here in this region, but I really think this is why we come back to this sort of commercial reality. This is what your business will look like in 5 years. This is how you build a resilient business. Not will you report to your stakeholders, to your regulators. And then you made a really valid point, and I have many conversations with clients about it. Any international investor is not going to invest in companies in this region unless they have a robust ESG strategy in place. And that doesn't mean what they read in a sustainability report. It means, do your board understand what the ESG risks are? Does your senior management have a resilience plan in place? And how do you see this panning out over the 5, 10, next 20 years? That's what I would add to that.
I think this is, we're kind of agreeing that the right way is, and we're shedding light on some of the realities in our region.
Was to add to that point just quickly there. So, and it kind of goes to Jesse's point, right? So we had a client who we've been supporting with their ESG reporting for the last 2 or 3 years. Very financial services institution. They went out in the market and did a roadshow to try and raise funds. They travelled through the US, Europe, Japan, and they had a number of challenges and a number of questions around ESG, which, at the senior levels, from Chief Risk Officer, Treasury, they couldn't answer these questions around what their strategy, what their value is. And whilst it didn't impact on this occasion, the feedback was, going forward the next time around that you're looking for a capital raising, there's a good chance that some of the institutions, the large banks, the likes of Europe, etc., would actually support them on that journey as well.
Totally. Thank you for that. It's actually making our job easier, right? Hopefully. Okay, but maybe bring that to the next level and accepting that there are some hard realities, if you like. Rosh, I know that you have a lot of experience in reporting and in some of the frameworks. Do you think that the frameworks that are managed in the region, GRI or ISSB, do you think that they are helping us towards our goals, towards what we're talking about? What are companies using and how they're going about it?
Yes, so when it comes to reporting, it's still a very overwhelming exercise for companies because, first of all, they lack the capacity to do the reporting, or at least to understand why they're reporting. The downside to actually do things to be compliant is that they're just rushing to get it done, right? They don't stop and observe and try to understand, why am I reporting against these KPIs? Why are these KPIs important to my business? How can I integrate them within my strategy? So currently, companies or clients, especially the ones that have just started their sustainability reporting journey, they still face a lot of confusion to why they're doing this. And some of them, to be quite honest, they don't care. They just want to tick a box, right? They just want to be compliant, have the report out, do the presentation to the board, and then move on, right? They have no intention to integrate sustainability within their strategies. We have seen a lot of development when it comes to sustainability and ESG reporting, especially last year with the launch of the ISSB sustainability standards. We've seen also in the EU, they have also the new standards launched last year, which companies now are mandated to report on starting from 2025. There's a lot of standards, which confuses also and overwhelms companies. Yesterday, I was also at an investor relations event, and I was talking to some European business partners, and they were talking to me about the standards, and they were like, it's crippling. Like the amount of data and the exercises that they want us to do, it's really overwhelming. And here we're talking about a market that is actually well established and developed. It's leading the way when it comes to sustainability integration and reporting in general, right? So these frameworks are very important because they help you to know what to focus on, at least since the start. But again, to Jessica's point, really sustainability is not just about reporting or complying. It's ideally, we wouldn't use the term ESG. ESG is just an approach, a way of thinking about your business that allows you to identify these emerging risks from climate change, right? And everything that comes with every issue, all the issues that come also with climate change and the emerging societal issues and et cetera. So it's just taken a new lens to how you look at your risks, your opportunities, how you can leverage these opportunities, how you can reduce these risks, and also just to add on to Jessica's point about, for an example, heat. There's a great study by S&P Global where they actually showcase how specific climate issues will materialize financially for companies. Heat was the biggest issue across industries. They did this study per industry, and heat was the most impactful issue across all industries. Because it's very simple. If you have a factory and you have workers in your factory and the heat is above 50 degrees, of course, people will not be able to operate at the same productivity level. Even your facility, like machines or whatever technology that you have, it will not also be able to operate at that heat. So you need to manage that risks. And this is also being experienced now. For an example, in LA, there are also studies for companies that are facing productivity issues due to the heat. I mean, here you would say, oh, we're used to the heat, it's the GCC, it's always like that. But this is being foreseen also, like record heat. The heat records are soaring here and also across the globe, where every year we're going higher and higher degrees. So yes, reporting is a good way to start, as you said, meet them where they are. But ideally, it's not something that you would do simultaneously or on the side. You need to look into it to integrate it within your core business and the way you create value.
So again, in many ways, what we say is that, yes, even if we have frameworks and, we do have some things that they can start from if they didn't want to do strategy, but it really comes down to what is it that we want to achieve with these frameworks? Because if you don't have a strategy, then it becomes a ticking the box exercise. It becomes, we're just trying to comply with the requirements. So I take that as one point. The other point that is also really important, and we talk about regulation. Answer over regulation is a problem, because this is, as you alluded to, the biggest problem now in Europe is that a lot of companies, even the larger ones who actually have the capacity to report, and they have teams and so on, and maybe starting to already have some data, they are struggling a lot with the amount of requirements. But essentially, also we go back to risks. So the heat risk. I mean, for our region, we're talking about, our region is going to be exposed to about 4 degrees of extra warming over the next couple of decades. We know that. So, and we have water issues. We already have desertification problems. So it's going to only add to it. Maybe we don't feel it because we have air conditioning. But in reality, it is going to affect water resources. It's going to affect food, food security and so on. So we're talking about big risks and how they impact companies. But specifically, maybe Jessica, you can talk to us a little bit about climate risks and how do we think about them as corporates? And, how do we comply, if you like, with how do we consider them as risks? And then in the context of what is happening globally, the climate goals, the UAE goals.
So I think so it goes back to the point, the one thing I hope you take away from what I say is this commercial alignment. What we do know around climate, look, it's the biggest issue of our decade. We're seeing a huge amount of momentum, and it's interesting, when I arrived here from Asia 7 years ago and I was talking ESG, nobody was conversing in ESG in the Middle East. Now everybody seems to be an ESG expert, right? But climate is the key. So what the UAE government has done very well, and this is partly its leadership at COP28, but both before and after, is be very clear about the transition, about how the UAE is going to transition, and its commitments that are made under the NDC, which stands for Nationally Determined Contributions, which is essentially how the country is going to reduce its emissions and adapt to climate change. So when I talked about the Sustainable Development Goals being a framework for you as a business, these climate commitments are also a framework for you as a business to think about climate as a risk. You know, we're going to lose a lot of assets. We've got the heat increase. We've got stranding of assets, which is essentially, you know, assets that you invested in that will become non-viable in a climate-stressed environment. You're going to have to write it off, you know, take that as on your financial statements and so forth. So you've got the risk piece, but there's a huge opportunity here that comes with the climate transition. And it's not just about energy. Yes, we need to reduce our emissions, but we also need to move into clean energy provision. But there's also all the climate tech that sits around that. We talked about agriculture. The whole ag industry is going to have to fundamentally change here in the UAE and across this region because food security is a massive issue. There are so many components that as a business, there are huge opportunities associated with this transition. And so when you think about as a company, okay, climate change, we've got the climate risk, but what is the opportunity piece? Now, thinking about that, you know, the challenges you may face, if you go away today and say, right, how do we embed climate? You're going to have to look at it from different perspectives. One, this will require investment. There was a capital ask that goes with transitioning to a climate resilient and a future fit business. But I would also argue, and it's interesting, I don't have any data to hand, but a lot of what you may put in place as a corporate will actually lead to cost efficiencies down the line. And I think that's really important. So you've got the investment piece, you've got the people piece, right? Not everybody really understands what this entails. So you need to train your people to understand climate as a risk and opportunity. You need to train them not just on the reporting side, not just on like the planning side, but right the way through the business so everybody understands what this means. And then, of course, the corporate leadership. You know, we talk about people, but the leadership that companies need to have in place is really important. And then the final piece is on innovation. And I know everyone loves to throw the word innovation around. You know, everyone wants to have an innovation unit or whatever. But there is so much thinking that still needs to be done, right? We don't have the solutions to deliver the climate change or address the climate resilience and adaptation that we want to put in place. So we really need to be building those parts of the business that are innovative and actually really encouraging both people who are driving different solutions, whether it's on the venture side or whether it's internally. That innovation piece is critical to how we move forward on this.
And I mean, you bring up so many important points about how climate risk, you know, and marine risks to companies. And I guess if companies who have not even thought about it yet, maybe taking it up a level, thinking, okay, I mean, today the government in the UAE, take the example, has already committed to net zero by 2050. So me, company operating in this environment where I know the government has already said that, it has got to mean something for me. It has got to mean at least me as a leadership in a company thinking about how is that going to affect my business today, even if I don't yet go into those kind of, you know, detail.
And actually just reminded me, one of the really important aspects of this is there's a sectoral perspective. Like not every sector is going to transition at the same speed, require the same capital investment and so forth. And the good thing about the Middle East being a little bit behind the curve is a lot of companies, financial institutions and governments have done quite a lot of work. So if you to look to what's happened in Europe and in the UK, there's some phenomenal resources around sectoral pathways. You know, so if you're in oil and gas, if you're in real estate, there is a lot of best practice out there. So you don't need to start from like 0.0. There's a lot to be leveraged. But really understanding that sectoral dynamic is very important to your strategic planning process because there's going to be a timeline involved. And then there is one other thing just to think about is carbon and carbon pricing, because you're going to see Europe obviously introduce the carbon tax piece. You're going to see compliance markets here in the UAE and across the region, across MENA. So at some point, you're going to have to start pricing in carbon if you're in a high polluting industry. So, you know, we've worked with companies actually, and you guys will talk to this as well, is setting in place a shadow carbon price. So you actually start to embed it into your planning process.
I mean, again, you bring up many interesting topics, but I went to hear from you, Goban. Do you also have a take on climate risk?
Yeah, so I mean, what's interesting is, and to Jessica's point around the investment that's required, etc. I was at a seminar probably early this year, which was between one of the development banks and Abu Dhabi as well. And they talked to some of the key areas that they're looking to invest in. One of them being around food security that you mentioned. They talked about digital innovation. They wanted to support their industrial sector as well. So these are kind of discussions that are happening, in some of the Emirates. And there's, I think, an awareness at some of the senior governmental areas that this is an area that we need to address. It's an area we need to take forward in order for, the UAE to meet their obvious net zero targets for 2050. And we're engaging with organisations, not just in UAE, but globally as well. To Jessica's point, there are people who have done this before. There's good practice. I think the biggest challenge that we face is kind of bringing some of that good practice and making it necessarily applicable for UAE, whether it's the climate that we have here or, the structures, the governance that we have in place. So this is one of the challenges that we'll no doubt see over the coming years. But I think the good news is that, at a governmental level, they're looking at it and they're looking to invest money, which is one of the key steps in kind of taking this forward as well with organisations.
Brilliant, thank you. Rash, did you have a take on it?
I'll just take kind of more narrow view or point here. When we talk about climate risks, social risks, there's that it's a lot for companies to absorb. Again, I'm never speaking from a local or let's say a regional perspective, right? What is important for companies in general is to understand you can't tick all the boxes. You can't be perfect or like sustainable in all the sustainability or climate change related topics, right? So as a business, you need to clearly identify what is material to you based on your industry, based on the level of your operations, based on the geographical locations of your operations. You need to understand what is relevant to you, prioritize that, and then focus on what kind of risks fall under that, and also, again, opportunities, and how you can decrease those risks, or if you have any negative impacts, how you can decrease them, and also if you have any market opportunities coming. For an example, regulations don't always mean only complying or reporting. Sometimes they also offer you opportunities to innovate, as Jessica mentioned, when it comes to innovation. So to make it easier for companies to start and reduce that overwhelming feeling that comes with integrating sustainability, it is better to have focus to what is most material to your business. For an example, now within the core concepts of the ISSB standards, we find materiality as one of the core concepts, because even in the ISSB standards, which take a financial materiality perspective, they also need you to prioritize, okay, what is most material to your business? The EU, for an example, takes a lens of double materiality. They want to understand what affects your business and how does your business affect the economy, the environment, and society. So that's also a good starting point for you to not get overwhelmed by all the jargon and also everything that falls under climate risk, social risk, etc., etc. Focus on what is most material to you and then start. And as Jessica and Gopal said, there are already good case practices, but there is something to keep in mind. But this is still, even for the developed markets, there's still new developments that people are learning or figuring things out as they move forward. That's something important to keep in mind. No one knows exactly the answer or how to do things.
Totally. I think, again, you bring up the same point, is that we're not all at the same place as corporates in this moment in time. And for so many companies struggling where to start, they need to start somewhere. And so perhaps even, if they do the frameworks well, then that's probably a good starting point. And actually, I'm thinking of how the EU even started with all of that. Even before CSRD, what did they do at the beginning? They asked for disclosures, right at the beginning. They started with disclosures. But they left it, if you like, to companies to do the strategy. I mean, in reality, strategy has to come, whether now or in the future. But yes, where do you start in order for it not to be overwhelming? And that is probably one of the key challenges to companies, whether in our region or in most, in most countries. Where do we start, and how do we start? So thank you for that. I guess I'm thinking of how much time we have, and perhaps one of the again, maybe this is from an investment point of view. It's data. And I know that the London Stock Exchange Group have substantial data that is available, but do we have enough data? And I know, Jessica, you have particular opinions on that we want to hear. How will data help? Is it available? And how would it help us improve where we are today in terms of sustainability? Do you want to?
You say that as well, lots of opinions. What was it? Yeah, I mean, Liv and I have been talking about this previously. We keep hearing this thing. We don't have ESG data, so we can't start. And honestly, I really don't think that's enough of a reason. You can actually start to collect the data today. We do have some phenomenal companies that are working very hard to identify data points, really start to build that sort of wealth of information. So I do think as a company, we don't have ESG data as a reason not to act. Start somewhere, bring in some of the data experts as well. The one thing I want to say about, I think to have your eyes and ears open to, is this risk of greenwashing, because we've seen the European Union, really panic about greenwashing, and rightly so. What we don't need is companies out there saying we're doing X, Y, Z, and then they're not. We don't have time for that. You'll end up in hot water because all eyes are on what corporate performance is actually doing, and actually companies are doing what they're saying. So the greenwashing piece is really important as well. And then the final thing, I'm conscious of time, I want to lay the seed, is that I do believe, and I'm interested for your opinions on this, AI is going to really help us in the ESG world. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff we're seeing that can come out of AI that can really feed in. A lot of people are not tying up the ESG and the AI conversation yet, but I do think it's going to happen, and I do think we sort of need all hands on deck to really figure this one out.
Goban, do you have any take on data generally, but also AI is with?
Sure. So I think on the data point, once again, agree with Jessica. So one of the areas that I mentioned earlier today was that, as an organisation, you need to be clear on the KPIs, the focus areas that you have, right? And then from that, you can either, start looking at the data to pick up the data, but, that first point is making clear what your focus areas are, where your priorities are, how that aligns with your strategy, and you can have the data follow. So, I did make the comment that it can take, a few months, 6 months, a bit longer to even get some of the data in place. But the important thing is you're taking those steps to add what you want to focus on as an organisation and how you take that forward. I think data is a challenge more broadly, especially when we're looking at quantifiable elements like calculating your emissions, especially for Scope 3. This generally involves a lot of engagement with your supply chain, and depending on the maturity of your supply chain and how much they're aware of ESG, you'll have different levels of data. So what we're looking at the moment with a lot of clients is an estimation of where they are with their GHG emissions, and slowly that transition will go from estimating what their emissions are across their supply chain to actually being able to accurately report on that, depending on when we're ready and willing to go with their suppliers. I'll just quickly touch on the point on AI. I think it's a really good point. I think one of the areas that you can potentially and this is also around kind of the climate risk and where the challenges are. So, if you have a supply chain that's highly dependent on, coming in from different locations around the world, AI can potentially be a predictive assessment of, depending on where there are climate challenges around the world, if there's any implications to a supply chain within real time. So there are kind of use case or opportunities there. I think there's probably still some time before we will actually see that transpire, but I think there's a step between enabling the data, getting as much data as possible to be able to support some of the decisions, and then from there we can leverage the technology and the AI and so forth.
Thank you. And Raj, it seems you're going to have the last word. So I actually will ask you if you want to comment on that, but I wanted to know if you had advice to give to companies starting today to end this session.
Honestly, maybe Jessica will disagree with this, but you need to start. You need to start somewhere, right? We had clients, for an example, at the point of data where we kicked off a project and then we postponed or delayed the project because they had no processes in place to collect the data. And I'm talking about very simple data such as gender-related data within their HR, which is very basic. You should have those numbers, right? So you need to start somewhere. Reporting is a great tool to start with. You don't have to publicly report. You can do it as an internal exercise to have an understanding of how you're performing, understanding what is a priority for your business, understanding your value chain also, what kind of topics or what kind of issues reside within your value chain, how you can tackle these, how you can also integrate sustainability in your core business. It's not something that goes on the side or simultaneously with other operations. No. Also, one of the benefits to the market now here, starting now, is that since the beginning you can integrate it within your core business. It doesn't have to be something on the side, then you go into that whole journey of integrating it or doing the whole change management journey to integrate it within your core business. Regarding data, there is data, depending on the market, of course. There is an issue now with the quality of the data. Despite there's a lot of text data, let's say, and some numerical data here and there, there's still a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to Scope 2 and especially 3, because it's very complex for companies to actually try to track everything within their value chain, right? And also even the capacity and the expertise to do those exercises. That's also one of the main challenges. So companies now also need to focus on building that capacity in their employees or bringing that expertise to their companies to have these people drive this journey, right? So it's a lot of considerations. My advice is just start and you will find your way, and also focus more on value and impact rather than just ticking boxes and trying to make your company look good or trying to make your company look competitive. At the end of the day, it's about better risk management and making sure that your business is resilient and successful in the future.
Brilliant. So start now is the advice. Thank you very much for that. And we're out of time. We may have time for a question, but if I can ask that whatever question it is, that it's a little bit general. If you have specific questions, that relate specifically to your company, you can please approach any of the speakers after. But if there's a question that could benefit everyone else in the room, that would be amazing. Please. Yes, right there.
Yeah, somehow, rather than a question, but some comments, equivalent to the question. First of all, I very much appreciated with your comments and the point of arguments that you are very calm and realistic thinking about ESG and the SDGs, which has been misleadingly led by the European countries. So that actually, one comment is that, how can I say, just one example, in the fact based on the fact, in the last 5 years or 10 years, only one country among global 20 countries has achieved the reduction of CO2 production, minus 23%.
it's only in Japan, happening in Japan. Every other countries, European countries, US and China has increased 9 to 20% or something. But somehow they are claiming for introduce the concept of SDGs, ESGs, so much public three-letter keywords. So that the reason behind the achievement is kind of the national mentality, national aversion, and wasteful spending. That means I just talked with Mr. Let me see, Deputy CEO of the NBF, Mr. Adnan Amal, for the effort for the SDGs and ESGs. It should be a kind of a gradual step rather than kind of attempt for the leapfrog approach. It should be a fair and calm understanding that you guys already mentioned during the panel discussion. It should be a gradual shift. And combining with the kind of national mentality of Japan, and I believe the important thing is that to achieve the real SDG and real ESG should be both in the economical measures. How the arrangement could be the more economical than current substitute, like comparing to the fossil fuel, moving to the renewable energy. In the case, needs to think about how it will really reduce the cost, how really reduce the consumption, how it really reduce environmental pollution. That kind of that is more important. I think that is more important factor. The criteria. One is avoid wasteful spending. Second point is somehow how the measure is economical manner, or make economical measure compared to the current situation. So that we could really, I believe, it could really change the more pollution-less, much less environmental hazard, and to make the more less costly manner. I think it is that is my understanding. Even though I'm running the company for the renewable energy, like a solar power plant, and I believe that it will be beneficial to the end user and customers. However, it has a dark side, since solar panel production, battery production, inverter production makes environmental pollution, and we are somehow gaining the benefit of the low cost production in a Chinese manufacture factory in China. But with thanks to the suppressed Muslim people over there, has provided a very cheap product, so that we can get the very inexpensive solar panel. That could be a benefit to the customers and the end users. However, in the area of the western side of China, many Muslim people are suffering. It cannot be resolved yet. So there is always a positive aspect and negative aspect. It is a matter of the balance. If the more and more positive side and much more less and less negative side, it could have a chance to change much better.
I believe that this is more of a comment, and I actually appreciate very much what you're saying, because in so many ways you have summarized how this is supposed to work. I think what you're saying is that in order for us to achieve climate change and to truly reduce emissions, we need to look at understand that this is a gradual shift, understand what it means for businesses, understand the cost of doing that. Yes, there are benefits for customers, etc., but there's a huge cost and therefore a huge investment, which probably is what Yeah, I think that's been said. The one challenge I was very completely is that as an economist, as soon as we start pricing in properly environmental goods and services, your cost-benefit analysis is going to change. And that's why I mentioned carbon. It's going to happen to water, it's happening to clean air. So the balance is going to change. So it's about being on the front foot, I think. I think what we're seeing here is that this conversation cannot possibly end because there's so much, good ideas and good discussions happening. Please feel free to reach out to any of the speakers afterwards, but please join me, thank them for a very, very interesting contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Luma, Ms. Jessica, Ms. Rash, and Mr. Goban for such a thought-provoking discussion. In our next session, we'll be sharing with you our clients' success stories. These clients are amongst 12 other companies who took part and successfully completed the sustainability program organized by NBF in partnership with Living Business. I'd now like to welcome on stage Mr. Ashish Gokhale, Executive Strategic Marketing and Communications, National Bank of Fujairah. Ashish is responsible for driving NBF's sustainability strategy and products. He's currently working on developing the strategy and framework for sustainable finance. In his earlier roles at NBF, he is responsible for digital platforms and product management in corporate banking. I would also like to invite Mr. Joshua Walker, Project Director, Summertown Interiors, Mr. Dharmendra Gupta, Financial Controller, Petrochem Middle East, Free Zone.
I know that you have heard a lot about a lot of advice from the experts about reporting, sustainability, what are the areas you could work on. And once you go out, there's a lot of food for thought for you. There is real food on the plate awaiting outside also. So this is kind of a small bridge. Personally, for me, as Keith mentioned, he likes action. I really like to celebrate action. So Keith mentioned a lot about the Living Business program. I had the opportunity last year to work on the first season of the Living Business program with companies and individuals like yourselves. They were mixed who were at different stages of their ESG journey. Some maybe way more advanced than what I expected. And some maybe just thinking, what I do? I really need to do something about this. And it was really heartening to see them take steps towards achieving, or at least taking some steps towards sustainability and a lot of things which were already mentioned. So we thought we would have a short kind of a walk the talk session with individuals and companies who have done something over the last 9 to 12 months concrete to just get a view about what they did and what so that you also kind of walk with some actionable insights about that. So without further ado, we have, I'll start with Joshua Walker. Josh, what I really found fascinating was the business model of their company. So I'm sure Josh has a lot to talk about Summertown Interiors and what they do. But I would also like you to kind of touch upon sustainability and what exactly it means for the organization. What are the key material issues which you have looked at?
Yeah, thanks, Ashish. Working good. So firstly, thank you for the platform here today to NBF and yourself, Ashish, to speak about our journey at Summertown Interiors. Just to give you some background about Summertown to start with, and then I'll get into the material issues. Summertown was founded over 25 years ago as a customised jewellery factory in Abu Dhabi, which quickly grew rapidly into Dubai as well, and then moved into interior design and fit-outs from 2009. In 2009, the journey of sustainability for Summertown started through the construction of our headquarters in Japsa, whereby we started looking into the certification or sustainable certification of our building, which introduced us to LEED. And from there, we sort of developed and learned a lot through the process of building our own headquarters about LEED. So that's where we sort of started. It then moved into, through the vision of our managing director, Marcus Bish, into a strategy, developing a strategy moving forward about how we can implement sustainability through the business. And that vision turned into the strategy through our material issues. So from there, we went out to our key stakeholders, so clients, investors, the board, also our employees and supply chain, through questionnaires, through surveys, through one-to-one meetings to find out what issues or risks they find in from their point of view that we have in our industry and our business. So from there, we found 7 main material issues, which we then focused on how we're going to attend to those material issues and how we're going to report on them. So they were economic, number one, how our performance is. Community, obviously we're part of the community, engaging with the community. Transparency and anti-corruption was a big one. Labour rights as well, being a key one, being in construction. Health and safety, responsible procurement, and sustainable delivery of projects. So from there, we sort of looked into how we're going to address that. We worked with some consultant companies. We actually worked with Roush and her team at Sustainable Square on our latest report, which was our 8th sustainable report, which we launched last year. And so that's sort of the background journey of Summertown and how we've sort of implemented. We've then gone a step further into targeting 2030 goals, which are aligned with the UN SDGs, as well as the UAE's Vision 2030 and net zero goals by 2050. And the 3 main goals that Summertown have at the moment that we're targeting is employee happiness and well-being, zero waste to landfill, which we dived into with NBF and the Living Business Program, which I can go into next, and 100% externally accredited sustainable projects through LEED, Estadama, WELL, etc.
Thank you. You almost kind of preempted my next question, so we will go into that later. Dharmendra from Petrochem. You're a chemicals distributor. So now for you, your organization, and maybe other similar companies who are into distribution or similar sectors, what does sustainability mean for you?
The rest sustainability goes beyond compliance. Petrochem is one of the largest chemical distributor, is the largest chemical distributor in the MENA region and the 14th largest in the world. So Petrochem distributes chemicals which are used in coating, resin, paints, pharma, and multivariate industries. Our suppliers are Sabic, Sipchem, Sadaras, and big refineries of the world. And our customers are manufacturers, which are multinational manufacturers. Petrochem has been there for last 30 years in this business. And I believe we would not have been there for so much time, sustainable time, without having the sustainable practices in place. In 2006, we adapted ISO certifications, ISO 9001, 14001, and 45001, which is the start of the sustainability for us. But what is important is also the UAE government and the JAFZA especially takes care of these environmental requirements, and that also helps us to be sustainable in terms of our requirement. Further, there are some employers of us which have been there from the beginning of the journey of Petrochem since 1995 that shows about our employees' commitment and engagement with them. And it's also how Petrochem has engaged with the community in the chemical fraternity in the industry that has helped us to be one of the you can say preferred distributors in the whole region.
Yeah, thanks, Dharmendra. So we kind of looked at the two organizations, their business model, what does sustainability mean for them. Maybe it's time to kind of now, as we say, talk about maybe the past 6 to 9 months. Maybe I'll go to you, Josh. What are the couple of things you talked about alluded to waste, so I'm sure you would want to talk about that. So what are the couple of projects which you really want to talk about, which you have done in the last 6 to 9 months? And I mean, if it was with the Living Business Program, sir, and if you could just give a color so that if somebody is inspired to kind of do something around that, it helps.
Yeah, definitely. So we've actually part of the Living Business program in the last 12 months with NBF, which for us was a huge benefit in connecting with the community in through Living Business through sustainable solutions. A lot of different sectors and different companies who provide different values, which is great, to be a part of and engage in. Through the Living Business, we connected with those people through the support of the team leading the business through Keith. And from there, we actually gained a few sort of suppliers who would support us in our journey, our 2030 vision goal to zero waste to landfill. So we connected with a few companies over the last 9 months, established framework agreements, one of them being St. Gobain, who are also on their journey of recycling a lot of gypsum materials, which you'll find a lot in a lot of fit-outs through the UAE. So, yeah, that was a program and a project that we took on. We established a waste committee in our organisation, which wasn't just from the projects team, but it was also from different departments of the company, so they could all have a touch point on our waste management.
Thanks, Josh. Dharmendra, I mean, I've seen your journey over the last year. You have done quite a bit of work around emissions reporting. So, I mean, do you want to talk about, and you also, I know you have a lot of future plans. So, like, I've seen that really you step up internally. So, do you want to talk about a couple of things you did last year and also focus maybe going ahead? What are your key priorities in this space?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I would like to thank NBF and Living Business for giving us the opportunity to get onto this program last November. And although we were doing so many things in terms of, environment, CSR and governance in our organization, but it was this ESG journey with the Living Business and NBF that really helped us to consolidate our whole activities together into a kind of a framework. So last year we did data gathering for Scope 1 and Scope 2. And so these are the emissions levels what we are having. Then secondly, we did on the CSR and DEI policies in terms of our social and putting all the social activities together. And on the governance side, we really were able to bring forward the policy and the structures in place with the help of our leaders in that.
Thanks. I want to check if anybody from the audience, I have a couple of questions more, but I'm conscious of the time. So I want to check if anybody from the audience has any questions. I think there's one gentleman there. Maybe we'll take questions first and then I'll come to my question.
Hi, good afternoon. I just wanted to understand when you say that you've been putting more vendors into supply chain, new vendors who are following the ESG and can help you source sustainably. Were you able to find more cost getting increased, or that was at the same level which you used to procure? So how was the impact?
Yeah, I do like that question because I do get that a lot actually. And actually we found that we are neutral at worst, and in some cases, some of the suppliers are actually paying us for the materials, such as copper. There's a lot of gold lining and a lot of electronics that we recycle. So when we come in to do a refurbishment, clients will leave electronic items, old computers, laptops, screens, etc. So what we're finding is that we actually gain some money out of that, and then we do also, there is some expenditure on putting some of the materials such as concrete, gypsum, carpets even into either recycling vendors will charge to recycle that because of the cost. So we're about cost neutral this year. We're starting in our report this year, we're putting the figures out on our waste on what value we've gained from waste recycling or how much we've lost, but we're finding that we're not losing any money in going about this process of recycling our material. Sort of to go a step further than that, we've actually established a key supply chain with our team, and we've actually established rates that we're getting actual money from. So our team are recommending and pushing the supply chain who are actually giving us some cash back into the pocket.
Yeah, I would like to add what Joshua mentioned on the cost effectiveness. So, given our sense of risk mitigations and what we do at our terminal, storage terminals, so the insurance who comes and visits us yearly, when they saw our plant health and safety and the how the site is maintained, so they give us the minimum risk rating, and that has helped us in reducing or maintaining the cost of the insurance or reducing it and not increasing the cost of insurance. So that has really helped in terms of, being a CSR, ESR compliant company, we were able to, reduce the cost.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a last couple of, please feel free to raise your hands if you have any questions. So I would like to keep it flowing and not just keep the questions till the end. Just one last couple of questions as we try and wrap up. This is something which actually I thought when you were speaking. What are the challenges which you have faced at the individual, at the organization level? In general, there was a talk about data, a lot of confusing standards. So what do you think are the challenges which you face to kind of take your next steps?
Yeah, it's a good question, Ashish. I was also thinking about it, with so much of inputs given by Jessica and the whole team. I think the real challenge is the mindset of the people. Everybody knows that how important the environment is. There's a UN study which came out recently that April was the hottest month in the last 175 years. And everybody gets affected by the heat, by the temperatures. So it's on us how we take on our leadership and bring forward that change of engaging with the stakeholders, with the suppliers, with the customers, and accelerating what NBF is doing and new business is doing with our customers. I think it's an excellent platform, to make people more aware of how they can do it. Secondly, I believe we as financial professionals, I think since it is an NBF program, many of us are in the finance field. Many of the finance professionals, it's on us. How do we showcase that how ESG can bring, take the trial balance and say, this much is the already investment that we are doing. Each one of us, the organization does some or the other activities in the, in terms of environment, social and governance aspect. How much we're investing in that and how much more we can do by bringing more awareness and engaging with the customers and the community at large.
Anything, Josh?
Yeah, I think just to add to that mindset is to encourage everyone in the room, if you haven't started the journey yet, is to take the first step. I mean, we were not, and we're still not, complete experts on the subject. We're still growing, and I know the panel before said that we're not a finished product, and the way I take it is we're continuously trying to improve, but we need to take the first step. So it's a mindset shift. We need to say that this is real. The environment also affects our health, which is number one, most important. When I meet anyone or I talk to anyone, they ask, how's the health of you and your family? It's number one for us. And environment impacts at the moment are going to, if not already, are going to impact our health. So I encourage everyone, we need to take a mindset of take the first step. Go outside your comfort zone. If you don't know about ESG, just take the first step, and then it will build from there.
Thank you. I mean, take the first step indeed. Just again, a check any questions from the audience. I think I see a question here.
It's great to hear your journey about when it comes to the sustainability. But I have one general question and one specific question to Dharmender, if may I. So the first question is, when you look here on your business model and you link it to the sustainability concept and your journey, so to what extent the technology and changing technology actually is a part of that journey? What kind of the technologies should be you consider to embed, not only on the reporting side, of course, that could improve your sustainability management, but in the business, actually? How does it come?
Yeah, good question. Recently, what we have done is we are using forklift in our terminal. So that is these are diesel forklifts. So we have a plan now to shift it to the electrical forklift. So that's the technology. At the same point of time, we have tanks in place. Those store hazardous chemicals. Of course, we cannot put solar panels on those tanks, although that technology will say in 5-10 years' time whether that is possible or not. So it's important that there are some technologies which are available now and which we are embracing, and there are some which is yet to come and which will be embraced further in future.
That's great to hear that. Thank you. So just one follow-up maybe question on that. Do you already started to measure how you decrease your environmental impact through the technology? It will be like to both of you, if may I ask.
Yeah, so the first thing is the data gathering. So we already know our emission levels by Scope 1 and Scope 2, and then this year we are trying ourselves to get into the Scope 3 framework. Once we have this data, then we also, year on year when we monitor it, we'll already know whether how much reductions for emissions we are reducing.
And just to add to that, for us, we from a sort of technology side, we sort of moved away from paper a while ago now, well before COVID. That was probably the big step one, going all electronic. We're starting to embed some new technologies into how we scan our projects in construction, which also takes away from sort of paperwork sides of things. So that was a big impact for us. The second biggest impact for us is, which I'm quite passionate about, which Ashish is a lot about, is our waste management and our projects. So that's probably our biggest input. And the other side of that is our electrical use in the project on tools. So moving into rechargeable batteries on all our tools and having them recharged through solar panels, etc. Renewable energy sources is where we're going. It has started, but there's still a ways to go.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Just one question, maybe to give space to others. But for me, it's really interesting to know, how do you cope with your supply chain? Because it's how do you engage with because you are the distributor, you are the summertime interiors. So how do you engage, and do you gather information from your suppliers already? Are you at this stage?
See, that's a work in progress, I believe, supply chain, because for us, we are getting the materials from the biggest refineries. So they already are into ESG framework for pretty long. So we are into that framework with the help of Living Business and NBF to how to gather that data across from them. And Scope 3 will be the best way to how to do it, and then take it forward.
Yeah, so for us, supply chain, obviously pre-qualification is there. We've got a process on pre-qualification, and then following up with them every 3 years to look into how their business is structured, but also the products they've got available. I think one of the other challenges from an economic standpoint is, there's a stigma around that sustainable solutions include cost. So working with our supply chain to get rid of that myth, because we're actually finding that, okay, maybe at the very start, when you make a purchase order to that supplier, the cost is 5% less, let's say, but that 5% drastically disappears if you go with a sustainable supplier who's providing a product that will last more long term and have a less VO2 output, etc. So that's what we're starting to find and starting to report on as well. But good questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. One final check if we have any questions. Otherwise, all that is left for me to do is not to add anything more. A great discussion. In summary, take your first step. If you have not taken, that's, I think, the summary which at least I took up. And thanks a lot, Joshua and Dharmendra. Can we have a big round of applause for Ben Fakat? Thank you again.
That's all. Thank you.